This video is going to be slightly morbid, but also interesting because it involves things. Well, the topic is all about things that happen surrounding death, or at least as far as I'm concerned. Why? I'll just angle that down slightly so you can see a bit more of me. My grandfather passed away recently, or at least recently at time of recording, which is somewhat in late August. Due to my video schedule, this will probably come out. It'll sort of come out towards the end of September. But it's worthwhile mentioning these things. Because it allows me to bring up several things surrounding it. So, many people might say that Christians should not be sad when their relatives pass because, well, their relatives, or even friends, will be in heaven. And whilst the principle of that makes sense, it's missing two important things. Firstly, we're not entirely sad that Grandpa passed. He was an old man, approaching 90 at an alarming rate, though he passed at 89. His quality of life was not the best. He was comfortable, yes. He lived at home, alone. He had a few people checking him every now and then. And his youngest daughter, my aunt, she would visit him whenever she could. She lived in the neighbourhood, or near enough anyway. Bedfordshire, I think. However, he was also lonely because his beloved wife, my Nana, had passed away about 8 years ago, come to think of it. And to be honest, I'm surprised he's lasted this long. Being a habitual smoker and a steady drinker, he had basically preserved himself very well, so there was no chance of COVID ever getting to him, assuming he could survive entering the front door. But at the beginning of August, he had a fall. He's had falls before. This time was more severe because instead of breaking just his pelvis, he broke his hip. Anyone who's broken a hip knows that is actually severe, and for an old man who can't get around much at the best of times, it's very much a major thing to consider. So he was rushed to hospital. And he had to have surgery. But considering he was a man of 89 years, the majority of them spent smoking, his lungs would not survive very well under anaesthesia. But in order to do that sort of surgery, you need to have it. So he was put under, and whilst he survived the surgery, he did develop pneumonia, which for a man of over 80 years old was not a good thing. And he passed away, I think it was the 11th of August. God rest his soul. For all that, being out of the misery of living alone, and out of the misery of being confined to a hospital bed, something he was determined never to do, He was determined never to go into assisted living or a care home. He was able to live to a decent age and passed away without having to go into assisted care facility, which he would most certainly have to have done after being in hospital for a broken hip. But why shouldn't Christians be sad? Well, if going to heaven means that we'll just see them later on, surely we should be happy that he's gone. But you've got to remember, not only is he a beloved member of the family, but he's also gone away to somewhere we can't reach at the moment. It'll take us many years, hopefully, to see him again. So even those of us that believe wholeheartedly that he will reach heaven and that we will join him, it's still going to be another 40, 50, 60 years for some of us. My niece and nephew, none of them have reached 5 yet. They're going to miss him the most because, whilst I didn't know him very well, they won't see him for hopefully 80 odd years. Maybe more if we can avoid it. To put a better analogy into this, it is similar to if we had someone, a close friend, a loved one, a relative, going away on holiday somewhere, or just to live in another country. It's sad seeing them go. It would have meant more back in the day where instant communication was not possible. Even these days, with our internet and our instant communication, we can still feel miles apart from someone when they're on the other side of the world, because they're not here. The internet doesn't eliminate distance as much as we might think it would. So being sad about a relative passing, even if you're going to believe that you'll see them again, isn't ridiculous. It actually makes perfect sense. But how do we respect the dead? Interestingly enough, on one of my Reels runs that should be out, it might be out by the time this video goes live, I don't know, I'll have to double check my schedule. But one atheist, who I can't remember the name of, but he's a regular contributor to the atheist community of Austin, yes, I'm going to keep going on about them, he said that one of his relatives, I think he said his sister or cousin, something like that, she passed away. She was a non-believer, and he saw Facebook posts going up saying, "Heaven has received a new angel." And he said that was incredibly disrespectful. It didn't take into consideration her beliefs. This comes to an interesting topic regarding respect. But I'll have to come back to that because there are a few things I need to mention. Firstly, I mentioned this in the Reels run, so I'll see if I can link it when I get the chance. I mentioned that my master, whom I shall never name fully except with his moniker Viking, as we're going down the archery range, because he kept his he kept his lives very separate. He worked, he did archery, he was a husband and a father, and a grandfather for that matter, but he never mixed them. I never met his family, they never came down the archery range. I never saw him work. To me, he was Viking, an archer, and my master in the forge. And I'll respect him for that, and I'll never reveal his name online, because he never had Facebook, he was never online like that. So, that's one way I respect him. Another is by the salutation I give him. Because if it's someone I know has passed away, and I don't know what faith they are, I'll do the standard moniker that most Christians will do, which is, God rest him. However, I know that he was a non-believer. That wouldn't stop me, however, from saying God rest him. Instead, I'd actually look at what he wanted to believe. He was non-religious, so no other moniker would meet his satisfaction. But when it comes to what he was passionate about, as his name suggests, the Vikings, the Norse. So if any god was to be worshipped by him, it would most likely be one of the Aesir. Therefore, whenever I speak about him, I always say, glory be his at Ragnarok, and sign, not the cross, but Ophala, the rune for family. This shows my respect for him and what he believes, or at least is passionate about. Respecting the dead is something we do in our own ways. And often when it comes to people talking about a relative online who has passed away, I would use a line I picked up from a song that I adapted into a Christian song. Even those who are gone are with us as we go on. It may seem simple, may seem silly, whatever, but if you think about it in all contexts, that makes sense. It's not quite ancestor worship, though it can be treated as such, if one wishes. It's not quite necromancy either, but if you think about it, remembering people from the past and keeping their works alive keeps them immortal. A classic example is William Shakespeare, often referred to as the immortal bard. His many plays, Julius Caesar, Richard II, Romeo and Juliet, Macbeth, Hamlet, A Midsummer Night's Dream, Much Ado About Nothing, you name it. Anyone that does a play written by Shakespeare is keeping his works immortal. Keeping him alive. Remembering him in so many ways. I remember one time a friend said, well, she was missing her father. And I said, keep telling your daughter about him. And she will keep his memory alive. It's not dismissing her feelings. It's not dismissing her beliefs, as I didn't know she was a believer or not. But it's a way of keeping his memory alive, but also grounding her in her duties as a mother. Keeping her in the moment that she needs to be in. But now comes the interesting part of respect. The reason why I normally say, even those who are gone are with us as we go on, rather than God rest him, on people's profiles, is because, well, I don't want to force my belief on people, much as many atheists will say that's what we do. That's not the right time to talk to them about that stuff. If that's something they want to talk about themselves, they will bring it to us, not the other way around. So, with regards to respect, this becomes interesting. Is saying that heaven has gained a new angel disrespectful to someone? They might take it as disrespectful, but are they really just being offended? That Reels run wasn't my best work when it came to that, but then again I was rushing things through, trying to get everything done, as I was trying to get some decent sleep at that time, and I still wanted to get all of those videos at least drafted before closing up for the night and going to bed. So I didn't address it properly. That's why I'm doing it now. I would say it depends on what you count as offence or counts as disrespect. As disrespect implies deliberately breaking a boundary, pushing something beyond tolerance. Granted, having been bullied all my life, I have a fairly robust view of that sort of thing. I have a thick skin. It's difficult to offend me, it's very difficult to threaten me. But I also know when things can go too far, and also how to nip it in the bud. In fact, that's generally my policy. Nip it in the bud before things go too far. Be it politely, talk to them privately, or if that's their style anyway and they just keep going, just go for it. Strike back. When it comes to that sort of thing, you have to be robust. I always say when it comes to anything regarding respect, if you can't eat it, don't serve it. The best example I can come up with, which is actually a very good analogy for this, is say you're in a culture where serving meat to your guests is a must to show them respect, because meat is expensive and you want to show that you take them seriously as guests and therefore they deserve the best you can offer. Putting meat on the table is the least you can do. I think you can see where this is going. What if one of them is a vegetarian or a vegan or something like that? Or you serve up a dish that they can't eat for their own religious reasons. For example, you serve up pork because that's what you got, and they're Jewish or fundamentalist Christian or Muslim, or beef and they can't eat because they're Hindu. You get the idea. Then again, many people might say, what if your culture requires that you eat meat, or that someone serves you meat, but the people who are serving you are vegetarian? Do they have to go against their beliefs in order to serve you? No, that is the same thing. If you can't eat it, don't serve it. It may sound like double standards, but when you think about it, you're doing what you do best compared to what they do. And whilst in some cases that isn't respectful, there is also an alternative. It does mean that people who eat meat may need to work a bit harder to make, say, a nut roast or something else, but that's just the way things go. It's important, very important, especially when it comes to allergies, to bear that in mind. If you can't eat it, definitely don't serve it, because, well, if you're that allergic to, say, nuts, and someone says, oh, you can do a nut roast for me, you can't do that because, well, you're allergic. It's perfectly reasonable. But it's disrespectful to a memory of a person if you serve meat at their funeral feast when they are a vegetarian. Some might say it's taking the piss, and I don't blame you. But that's where the line is drawn. That's where we need to start thinking very carefully about what we want to think about in terms of respect. This is a delicate topic to cover, and I'm sure many people will say that I'm being insensitive by broaching it here. But I would say, to that person whose relative passed, and people say, heaven's gained a new angel, that's them being respectful in their way, because they hold her very highly in their culture. So highly, in fact, they say that she will be an angel. That is respect in their eyes. And that's the important thing that matters. Accepting it, that's another matter entirely, and one that will get squirrely. It's very much like if an artist draws a painting that is incredibly beautiful and respectful to most cultures, but to another looks horrendous. The classic one, the crooked cross, that many would see as a swastika. There's actually some strong evidence to suggest that the swastika was used across multiple religions. It only seems to be suggested as such by this article on Quora, turning up in a broad range of things, and only really cropped up as the symbol of the Third Reich when Hitler decided to take it over. And ever since then, one can imagine it only as the symbol of the Nazis. Whereas in actual fact, when you pay attention, you can see that it's used almost universally in various forms. It's actually similar to the Triskele, in a sense, the triple spiral, which turns up on the Celtic symbols and turns up on the flag of the Isle of Man. So it's this sort of symbol that, whilst to some people will seem extremely disrespectful, especially if you do it in terms of Jews, depending on the orientation, the specific shape, and indeed the intent of the artist. That makes a world of difference when it comes to what it means. It's that sort of thing that we need to be aware of. That sort of thing that we need to always remember when it comes to respect. What one person means by it can be interpreted completely differently. And that is where understanding each other needs to come in. If you understand that the people did not mean any disrespect, and therefore accept that they don't wish to cause you any harm, there's absolutely no need to be offended by it. Once me and my parents went to some friends of ours in Wales, and there we learned that their youngest son, who had cancer, leukemia, something like that, he had passed away, but he had been working very hard. He was only about 8 or 9, something like that. Maybe even younger, I don't remember. But he was doing everything he could whilst he could to be a part of the family, to make memories with them. In my eyes, as I was working in Heritage at the time, I saw him as a warrior. To some people that might be me saying he was violent or something like that. No. A warrior is a man of strength, a person of strength. And that was a sign of fearsome strength. Doing everything he could to do what he could whilst he could still do it. My grandpa is often the same, or was often the same, God rest him. He would do everything he could whilst he could still do it, even if really he couldn't. That's how I choose to remember my grandparents. Doing everything they could whilst they could still do it. My granddad, he made sure that everyone was accounted for when it came to his will, very early on, before he started losing his mind. My grandma was a Methodist minister, and she made sure that she had everything sorted when it came to her end of life. She made sure that she could go to a certain home, and she spent time in a care facility before then. My nana, she was still very much aware to know that it was cancer she had. Even though she was showing very severe signs of dementia. And my grandpa, no doubt, was trying to do something when he fell and broke his hip. And he was determined to keep going for as long as he could, doing what he could. I've often said that if I was in such a position where I couldn't do anything, just shoot me. And I would expect people to do it. That would be respectful. I wouldn't hold it against them, I wouldn't call it murder. So remember, what one person considers disrespectful might in fact be the highest form of respect we can offer. And not in an ironic way, in a true way. So stay honest and respectful, stay safe, and God be with you, my friends.